everybody to the next installment of the WeAreOne Sessions. My name is Neb Josevic. I'm a senior certified executive coach at Neb Coaching and Consulting. And as always, I'm super happy to connect with all of you in these moments, which are really more than anything meant for us to connect, to share ideas, and hopefully continue following in a positive way the trajectory of everything that is going on for all of us around us, looking towards some light. And today we're going to be looking towards some lightness. So I'm going to start off with a rather ridiculous story. Last Thursday, after a very intense week, which I'm sure many of you have had as well, I did one of my usual, I did my little meditations, I did my little gratitudes, a little yoga, went to bed super early, which I tend to do, and fell asleep like a little child, lovingly, only to wake up in the middle of the night with a weird pain in this finger. In my finger, which I thought was ridiculous, right? So it felt like I had been literally stung by some sort of a bee from the inside out. I'd never felt anything like this before. And so I thought, no big deal. So what I decided to do was what, most of us try to do in the middle of the night when we have some troubles. I kind of meditated, I thought about good things, etc. And I thought it was going to go away. A couple hours later, it had traveled up my hand, into my wrist, up my arm. And at this point, my husband wakes up and he's like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I got a pain in my finger. I don't know what's happening," right? Have you ever seen anything like it? And so we had one of these moments, which we lovingly call our midnight dates, when one of us can't sleep or the other for whatever reason. And so we chatted up a little. And then what we came out of that saying was like, listen, it's great. We're all doing our best. Everybody's working hard. We're trying to take care of ourselves. But what's become very clear with this, what we're now calling the texting finger injury, we have no idea where it came from, is that it's time to take our self-care and our fun very seriously. So I'm telling you this because last weekend I was in an internship, as I call it, practicing all the things I'm going to talk to you about, but very rigorously, and it worked like a charm. So I'm going to keep telling you about some of the silly things we did over the weekend as examples of the things we're going to talk about next, but I also welcome you to share your own ideas with me because that's the whole point here. So we're heading for a holiday weekend. Some people around the globe, many actually, are in a situation where they are having imposed vacation due to the circumstances. And so we thought, it's about a good time to consider sort of three main things I think that can help folks hunker down at home, but perhaps in a more positive way. And those three things are how to nurture true joy, even in the most difficult circumstances. 2, how to have fun, but with limited resources. And 3, how to create meaning to inspire you going forward. And meaning is a topic that we're going to continue working with and rolling around in the next sessions, but gently, as a kind of positive way to start looking to the future, start mobilizing ourselves and try and pull ourselves out of just being sort of stuck in the moment. But today we're going to stay light. So Martin Seligman, I don't know if you've heard of him, is considered to be a father of positive psychology. And he, in his studies of what happiness is, came out with sort of 3 major elements. And the first is pleasure. It's the ability to just enjoy things around you, right? The second is flow. It's the ability to lose yourself in any activity with loved ones, with work, with a hobby, in such a way that time seems to stop, but that really nurtures you. And the third sort of form of happiness was meaning. It means going beyond yourself and your pleasures. And so while all of these 3 things are really important, they work in tandem, the idea is that you really need to kind of cater to all 3, because if you're just living a life of pleasure, it's pleasurable, but it's temporary and it's not wholly fulfilling. On the other hand, let's say if you're just living a life that's completely and seriously dedicated to higher meaning, that's very fulfilling, but you may be struggling with, enjoying some of the finer pleasures along the way. So as we are going through the stresses of these days, the reality is, as we've been chatting before we started the recording, is that, we have now time and space for new things, even if we're very busy, because, all this moment is being substituted is being a substitute for the times we used to go out of the house and do other things. And so that creates opportunity. And the question is how we're going to take it. The key is really to shift our perspective towards light and lightness, you know, with this sort of double meaning of the positive, but also lighter. My question to you in terms of helping us shift that perspective is, what if you had planned and chosen this moment? Obviously not in terms of the terrible things that are happening around us, the sicknesses, the challenges, but I'm speaking only in terms of your time at home, right? What if you had said, I want weeks to stay at home, to make the most of it, and to luxuriate in it? And I know some of you are thinking, I'm trying, Nev, we're trying here too, and I'm still finding frustrations, and I'm getting bored, or I'm getting antsy, and that's totally fine. Anything that we're talking about here is not about perfection, and it's never about denying the things that are difficult. More than anything, it's about trying to focus our attention in a more positive, thoughtful way around things that can help us, right? So this is not lost time. If we continue to think of this as everything that we're losing, then that's all we're going to see. As we mentioned in our first talk, it's about selective perception. You're going to keep finding what you keep looking for. So if you're looking for all the reasons that this is lost and wrong and messed up, that's what we're going to keep finding. I'd like to kind of say, what if this was gained time? What if we're now gaining time to do things that we didn't have time for before, or we didn't make time for before? And just that slight shift of leaving that window open and saying, what if, can make an important impact in the way that you orient yourself, your energy, your intention in making the most of this. So remember, this is temporary, the situation we're in. It will pass. We'll talk later on in another session about what that means for us going forward. But for now, just remember that this is not forever. And the best antidote to anxiety, as research has shown, as those of you who may have gone through anxiety and sought help and guidance for that, is positive action. And that doesn't mean just acting in any way or acting thoughtlessly, but even simple, small, positive steps towards something that will make you feel better can go a long way towards dispelling anxiety, or at least accepting it and making it more bearable. So let's start with the first one, how to nurture true joy, right? So joy is essentially a sense of happiness in the moment. In that sense, it's rather connected to concepts of mindfulness, right? And the question right now is, what would make you truly content right now? Even if you're feeling like contentment feels far away, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to find contentment, even in the tiny little things. Again, the objective is not to expect some sort of massive change right away, just to start collecting little joys from the day to day. So the objective is to fix yourself in that moment and focus on a more positive vision when you can, right? A lot about this is about the concept of savoring. And savoring is really the idea of putting active, conscious attention to the experience of pleasure, right? Sounds familiar. So the same Martin Seligman, basing his work off of Fred Bryant and Joseph Veroff, came up with sort of 4 ways to savor life. One of those is basking. And basking in this sense is allowing yourself to enjoy the receiving of praise and congratulations and care from those around you. And I would shift this a little, or at least expand it and say, how about also enjoying in the giving of that? The second is Thanksgiving, which for those of you who have been with me for a while, you know I talk a lot about gratitude, not gratitude based on obligation or making you feel bad about your difficulties, but just a kind of conscious gratitude for the things that you have. And this idea of expressing gratitudes on a regular basis. The third form of savoring is marveling, which is losing yourself in the wonder of the moment, right? And we'll go a little bit deeper into each one. And luxuriating is the fourth, which is really indulging your senses. And when we talk about the senses, we're not just talking about the typical five, but we always sort of add the sixth, which is also your sense of self, right? Being able to enjoy something with yourself, by yourself, about yourself, which is particularly important for folks who are on their own these days or who are caretakers of others. So it's all around us, right? We're surrounded by this opportunity. The question is, can you see it? Are you willing to see it? And how much? So again, it requires some intention. It requires some time and space. You know, and a lot of these things that we talk about, people say, you know, maybe think, yeah, conceptually, this sounds great. Now, what can I do to, you know, have it happen? And you say, well, like any new consciousness, any new skill, any new orientation, it takes some time and patience, right? And it takes what we call the building of that consciousness muscle so that it grows. The more you start practicing, even if in the beginning it feels a little off or a little forced, over time it starts to flow more naturally, right? So it's patience, just like you would have with anything else, but it doesn't mean that it requires so much more effort. So how do you apply that right now? We keep talking about self-care, and self-care, you know, on a light level. We're doing spa weekend this weekend. I ordered some salts and things. But it also means caring even in the moment, noticing if you're hungry, if you're this, if you're that. And so if we look at each one of these, as we said, basking, meaning the, you know, enjoying the love of others and the appreciation of others, but also being willing to give it. As many of you have experienced, like we have ourselves, our lives before were so intense. Even if your life continues to be intense right now, we were running around from different places, and maybe we forgot to express a thank you or an I love you. Maybe we forgot or didn't want to or couldn't really spend time in close quarters with our loved ones. And so while that can have its frustrations, the idea also is this is a chance to allow yourself to ask for the comfort that you need. When you get it, to know and believe and enjoy that you deserve it, and also be willing to selflessly offer it to others when you feel it, but without a condition, without an expectation, without, you know, doing it just because you want something in return. The second of Thanksgiving, as we say, is not just counting your blessings at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, which is a nice practice and a very effective one to take one out of their own stress and out of their own complaints, but it's also nurturing things. We don't just give thanks by using our words, we also do it with our actions. And so one of the ways that we did that this weekend was we decided to do a little micro pruning of plants. And I also, with our interior plants, I said, I'm going to give them a shower, which means that I take out a bowl of water and a little, you know, cloth, and then I wipe down their leaves because they get full of dust. And while I do this, I have some conversations with our plants. Sometimes, you know, these are the typical conversations of you're doing great, you know, but this time I really got into it, and call it confinement. I don't know. So I started, oh, I really like your new leaves. We have a new plant. It looks like dinosaur footprints. I don't know. You know, how do you like your new neighbor? We started to say there's, you know, boyfriend and girlfriend between these two plants. And I got into it. And my husband at one point was like, what? What are you doing? I said, I'm enjoying. We're having a conversation here. But lo and behold, I promise you, the next day they looked better. I swear. So this was our form of saying thank you for being in our space. When we did the little bit of pruning, or it's organizing a corner, you know, it's stuff you haven't had time for before, stuff that was a pain in the butt before, cleaning a little bit here, preparing something nice. This is nurturing. We consider this to be a way of saying thank you to our home, which we adore. And even if you don't feel necessarily that way about your home, this is a great place, a great moment to see ways that you can make it your adoring abode, your sanctuary, right? And these are also ways of giving thanks. Marveling is about what's beautiful around you, right? What's inspiring, what's lovely. We've been seeing people sending photos of sunsets, of sunrises, of plants, their kids doing silly things, right? And so this marveling of just looking around you instead of always the next vacation, the next big payoff, the next big whatever, it's what is around you that is beautiful. And beauty is actually a massive positive impact. Some of us, I think, maybe appreciate it more than others, but as I've learned from my folks who are architects, you know, the space that you're in has enormous impact on how you feel and how you move through the day. And if you're interested to know more about this stuff, there's a woman I mentioned in our first call, Stephanie Bennett Voigt, through Daily Om, that has this short little course. It's actually a long course with short messages every day for a year, where she talks about unblocking your home. And she gives you, it's not just tips, but these sort of beautiful little thoughts and poems around how to reconnect with your space. And I think it's particularly helpful these days. And the last of luxuriating, you know, your senses is, you know, do you just throw the meal on the table and watch Netflix in the meantime, which can be fun at times? Or do you focus on your food? Do you make a nice meal? My mom used to always say, you know, put a tablecloth, set the table nicely, you know, put candles or a nice little lamp. But luxuriate, take your time. Is that your morning coffee? Is that in that quiet moment in the morning or at night with your loved ones or by yourself, you know? But just take the time to appreciate the things that before were lost in a rush, for example. So that's about joy. Let's move on to how to really have fun. And again, I understand that for some people, this might feel forced right now. But again, it's also a matter of perspective. You know, fun is about losing yourself in enjoyment. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be complete, but it's absolutely possible. If you think about it, you know, many situations, for those of us, for example, who went through either personal tragedies or larger crises, sometimes during wars, during moments that are so severe, people's laughter, people's love, people's need to come out and also find some lightness becomes that much more important. And sometimes it comes out even in funerals when people feel like it's so inappropriate and yet it's so natural. The body needs, the soul needs to balance out. And so if you're finding yourself in moments where sometimes you are just over this and other times you're laughing, don't feel bad or awkward. I would say nurture it especially when it feels natural. So the question is, what right now is going to help you disconnect, help you play, help you flow, and help you imagine? Think about the concept that play is defined as an activity that has no purpose other than enjoying it. It has no results. It has no other objectives other than the play itself, which is really hard for some of us who, especially in, you know, surrounded in a world with belief systems where everything is about productivity, about results, about what you should do, something we'll talk about a lot more next week, something that's very hard for us to say, I can just take time and do something that is just silly, is just fun, right? And the idea is absolutely consider the fact that we are doing just as much for ourselves in terms of improving our energy and our productivity when we are taking time off as we are when we're focusing. The other thing too is about imagination. You know, imagine those people who have been incarcerated, folks who have had accidents or through illness suddenly became incapacitated. And we're not talking for a measure of weeks or months. We're talking about for life or for very long periods of time. What keeps the soul going? Imagination, right? That's what kids are doing all the time. You know, they used to need nothing more than a stick and a rock or a ball, and they got along with it. So the idea right now is, what things spark your imagination? Is that a kind of book? Is that a kind of game? The other day, we got into puzzling. I gave my sister credit for this because we used to do this a lot on our family vacations. And she the other day sent me a photo saying, this is what we're doing. We're puzzling, doing puzzles. And so I somehow found in our house a bunch of puzzles and I thought, oh, we're so tired. I'm not sure I feel it. And then my husband and I said, well, let's just put it out. You know, he said, well, why don't you start and find the borders? So I did. really reluctantly because I was so tired. But before you know it, even though we could barely keep our eyes open, we got obsessed. You know, we started putting it together. And then now it's like on the big table. And he said, no, no, don't cover it. Put it on the big dining table so that we can just see it. And lo and behold, no matter how tired we are, every once in a while, we're kind of like, oh, that one goes there, you know, but it's a kind of small distraction, silly childhood distraction to help us realize that not everything is so serious. Not everything has to be so intense. So what are these healthy ways? That's the objective. What are these healthy ways that you can flow in an activity that is not about productivity, but is about play? Again, it's not about perfection. You don't have to be super into it. It's just start. And I think one of the important things also is do something a little bit new. A lot of us have our go-to ways for relaxing, for enjoying, and that's great. Most of those, I hope, or at least some of those are going to still be able to serve you. But a lot of what happens when we're at home is that we also tap out our usual options because we don't usually have time to do so many things at home, right? And so the idea is, what new things can you do? Silly or seemingly stupid as they may be, just start. You don't like it? Okay, try another one. If you have kids or if you have pets, they can also very much help engage you. And so these are just different ways, right, to at least plant the seed of there could be something else going on right now than just the most immediate crisis. So what are these healthy forms of escape? Maybe you're going to start cooking not just to feed yourself, but maybe you're going to start looking for a new recipe if you can, you know. There's many different ways to make spaghetti and tomato sauce, apparently. What talents and interests have you had? Do you have that you lost sight of because there wasn't time because of work? That now you say, maybe I'll learn to sew, or maybe I'll, you know, pick up that guitar that's been sitting in the corner. Again, if we take it from a perspective of I have to achieve or I have to be as good as I was before, then it just kills the point. It's just sit with it for a little bit, see what comes out, right? Keep that window open. The other question is what brings you together with your loved ones, right? Maybe you had the typical things, maybe a lot of those, which is understandable also in today's age, were virtual, tablets and the like. But maybe you have some of those board games sitting around, you know, maybe there are conversations you can have with your kids. The great thing is that we have right now the internet, which those of us who are old enough knew there was a life before internet. And then it was about, you know, question games and other things. So you can search easily. I think Amazon is still working. You know, we ordered a little game the other day. Anything that seems interesting that doesn't have to cost a lot of money or is completely free, because a lot of libraries, resource centers are offering many options for free these days. You know, just take a little moment. Again, it doesn't mean you have to super get into it or pressure yourself about it. Just try. And laughter. Laughter is one of the most amazing things for the soul. Who doesn't like to laugh? Oddly enough, research shows that while children laugh about 400 times a day, adults laugh something like 10 if we're lucky, which is sad, but true. And so what is it that allows them to laugh so easily? Because yes, children find wonder in things that we've already learned about as adults, but it's also because they so easily find the whimsical around them. And so is it that you're enjoying the memes that people are sending around? Is it that you just strike silly jokes? I always laugh with my husband. He's got this, what we call his typical Pettis humor, which is very silly. It's very childlike. Sometimes I roll my eyes, but I'm actually deeply grateful every time he cracks a joke, especially in the moments when we're taking ourselves too seriously. So these are some ways to consider how to just bring a little bit more fun or a lot more fun without expectation or pressure, but into the current circumstances. And the last is about creating meaning. Again, as we said, this is just about planting a small seed. We're getting started without any pressure again. And meaning in this case is beyond pleasure. It's about finding some purpose that keeps us going. As Martin Seligman said, it's a purpose beyond just ourselves and our immediate needs. And so the reality these days is that there are people who are super busy working from home, adjusting to different circumstances. Others who suddenly are without jobs or have jobs suspended, are floating or are retired but can't do their usual activities, and many other options. And so there is that gap in some ways in terms of the ways that people are spending time or the time they have available. But still, no matter what your situation is, the reality is that we're dealing with so much uncertainty these days, rolling uncertainty, very different from a single tragedy or crisis that then afterwards you're dealing with recovery. We're still rolling with this. We've got mixed emotions. We've got sort of a lack of control of what's happening. And so one way to kind of hold on to something in that, something we intimated about in the first session, is about finding this new bliss. And bliss may seem like a big word, but it really is this idea of, okay, beyond finding joy, which is really in the moment, and then playing and engaging certain things, which is really more engaging, right? This is around how can you perhaps craft something new that might be able to pull you positively going forward. So the question then is what new vision, what new value or goal will make you feel useful, engaged, and inspired? Useful because the case is that most humans want to feel, need to feel that they're capable. And particularly in moments when we feel like we're flailing and we're dealing with something as big as we are right now, much as we're in the same boat, there's a tendency to feel so out of control, so small or helpless. And so trying to orient our visions towards something that can make us feel capable and useful can go a long way to boosting our self-esteem, our confidence, and our motivation going forward. Right? Inspiration is about the moment, but it's also about something in the future. And engagement is, again, trying to find that flow. But once again, there's very much value in being engaged in the moment for something fun. And then there's also value in being engaged more long-term for something that you're perhaps trying to create or offer to others. So the objective is to pull yourself towards that new bliss, right? Something that motivates you towards relevant action for something important for you right now. So you may have had projects before or objectives before that made sense then, but right now may feel empty or just disconnected from the reality. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they have to go away completely. Just perhaps now is not the moment. But just like these calls came up for us, as we were shifting completely our business objectives, maybe there are things right now that, given the new circumstances, given the new feelings and experiences you're having, suddenly makes sense for you and motivates you to somehow stay busy in a positive way. I have a colleague, a former client and friend, whose own work has nothing to do with what she's doing, but at some point she remembered that she knows how to sew. And so she got a bunch of her friends, and they've been sewing masks for professionals in the medical industry, but they've been making them really sweet, right? They've been using all these patterns for things they were probably going to use for curtains or stuff like that, anything they could find around the house, right? Or get ordered in. But they're all these really beautiful, happy patterns. And she sent me a picture. I'm so proud of her, really, and so impressed by her. It's a way that keeps her busy aside from whatever she has to do work-wise. And she feels like she's doing something to contribute. And of course, it's extremely necessary, right? So that goes to this. It's, what are the new priorities for you, for yourself, for others, personally, professionally, spiritually, right? What now really naturally seems clearer to you or easier or more important to move towards, right? And so the idea is, again, if you put something as a priority, it doesn't mean that you have to, as we say, marry it, right? Just start with a list and then test it out and see. Some of those things you're going to say, well, this is really more for fun. But other stuff you're going to say, hey, you know what? I think there's something I could do with this, even if it's a small craft that somehow helps just me or helps others, who knows? And this is also where it connects to the new. We talked about new interests and hobbies in terms of fun, And so it's very important also to allow those things to be just fun without a purpose, but maybe some of those things you see it can be put to a purpose as well. There's also now a chance for learning and discovery. You know, we had in our situation here some years ago, given what we do at work, when you start working and you start launching things, it's great, but you end up not having very much time to regularly do all that initial research and discovery that you were doing in the beginning. You end up getting into execution mode. And oddly enough, it was having a rather tragic thing happen for us on a personal level that forced me to have to take time back. But at the same time, then opened up time and opportunity to start to research again in depth, connect and re-inspire myself around what now was key for me, not just with our work, but just in my interests. Out of that came out so much of what we've been doing in the last years. Things that seemed to not make any sense. You know, I suddenly was curious about, I don't know, shamanism in terms of connection to the earth. Then on the other hand, I was looking at neuroscience. Then I was looking at shadow work, which is Jungian psychology, and then, you know, gardening. And suddenly all these different things coalesced into sort of new concepts of value that we could put out into the world. And projects were born. But again, the idea with meaning is don't worry about where it goes, because when we obsess too much about how it works out, then the ego gets in and then it becomes stressful. It's just about planting those seeds right now. Imagine it's a garden, put those seeds out and see which one of those starts to grow for you. And then the last part is about the future. You know, just gently again, we're turning our head a little bit up from just sitting in our homes and in our, how do I say, sometimes the caves and spirals that we get into. It's just looking up a little. And the question around that is, what do you want to position yourself for when this is over? We don't know what the world is going to be like. We don't perhaps even know what we're going to be like, but what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? You don't have to answer that right now, but just let the seed settle and see what comes out. So at the end with everything, make sure to take your time. Don't pressure yourself. As much as possible, what is beautiful about this moment is that instead of rushing to results and measurements and evaluations, we actually have a bit of time. We have no other choice to kind of percolate things. And we'll talk a lot more about that next week, how to continue developing these visions. But for now, just let it settle. And as we say, sometimes the best creative work actually happens when you're just enjoying and you're not trying. That's all I have for you today. Now I'd love to hear from you. Does anybody have suggestions, questions, ideas? Any thoughts? Sorry, Winnie, did you want to say something? I think you were muted.
Yeah.
Tell me, dear.
No, I basically said I found the session, what you said is very true. A lot of times we try to do something, we never find the time to. And I do find that is true. You know, working from home, you know, I started exercising. I think that's a big help to actually make me feel better, because I'm not going outside, I'm not commuting to work, right? There's no social interaction really with people aside from my husband. You know, we never spend so much time together, you know, ever. So that was a little tough, an adjustment, right? But so I found that, you know, just, you know, going online, watching the video, doing exercise along with it, just for an hour, hour and a half a day, that makes a big difference. And that's besides, you know, it may probably healthier for me, but that made me feel a whole lot better. And, you know, to your point, you know, just try to do something fun. So I find that that's very helpful during this trying time for me.
No, absolutely, Winnie. I think as you say, you know, I've heard a lot of people responding also to sort of these online communities for workouts. And you're saying an hour, hour and a half, God bless you. That's better than a lot of people are doing. That's awesome. What I wanted to inquire is, what are some of the things that you guys do for fun?
No, we don't do much for fun. That's the problem. You know, we're working at home, so I'm still working.
Right.
The problem is I find there's no need to commute, right? So I find that I work longer hours because I get up, I make my coffee, then I log in and I start working. I don't have that 1 hour commute time anymore. And then logging off at night because it's, you know, you're constantly checking your email. So, you know, I find myself working even 8, 9 o'clock at night at one point, and then my eyes are so tired, they're burning. I said, what the heck am I doing? You know, I
Yeah.
had to remind myself, and, you know, my coworkers are like, we had a little virtual coffee chat just to catch up because we don't see each other anymore. She says, you have to set a timer, a reminder, you just have to log off because you will actually get burnt out even faster, you know, from working at home because you're constantly, like you said, you're texting finger, and I feel like my wrist getting like carpal tunnel because I'm constantly just type and work away. But you just have to learn to, like you said, have some fun time, have some downtime, just do whatever. And you know, in the back of my mind, I always wanted to, but you know, there's this obligation to work, right? But that is true. Now, after hearing what you said, it's true. We should peel ourselves away from work, take that hour, you know, log off on time, do something fun. Puzzles, great idea. We used to do that with our kids, right? Never thought that I would do it, but yeah, it's a good idea.
No, it's very interesting what you say, you know, and actually it's come up in the other calls. It, it's a syndrome that I've seen a lot happen with me and with colleagues and with clients, particularly those who are entrepreneurs or self-employed and freelance, however you wish to say it, that, you know, it's this weird change from working under the structure of a larger organization to suddenly you're creating the structure. And so one of the first steps there is, and what's happening now to most people as they're at home, is now it's all about, sure, you've got certain hours and you've got the conditions that work sets for you, but now you've got all this flexibility. And the first thing that happens to a lot, it certainly happened to me, but a lot of other folks I know, is that exactly what you're saying. Suddenly we were working worse than ever. And I would hear people saying to me, oh, it's so great, you're an entrepreneur, you must have all this free time and flexibility. I thought, I'm an idiot. I mean, all I do is work, you know. It took the first, I would say to you, 7 years before I stopped working weekends and nights and vacations. And it was a huge change. It was almost a big anxious kind of shift.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are taught to say, like, I deserve time off. And I think the key for that was realizing that, and again, we'll talk about this in the future ones too, but that I am my work in the sense that if I start to flail, if I am not okay, I can't do anything else. I can't help anyone. I can't be there for loved ones. I can't do anything else. And the other thing was to realize that, you know, the time off, as we said before, the time that you're off, that you're nurturing yourself, is not just an extra nice to have. It's actually a fundamental cog in the wheel of keeping you as successful, as productive, as effective in general as possible. And it took a while, and I'll promise you, I'm still dealing with it. This idea of, you know, every time I see that I'm pushing a little bit too much, you're going to see it come out on the other end, right? You're going to see the effect of that. And this idea of, you know, when we rest, we're not just doing something nice for ourselves. We're actually taking care of the whole system. And it's tough, huh? Even after that, I was still counting in my head the number of hours I worked. And it was a real, it was like a real offensive thing to me when I realized, oh my God, some days I would do 5, 6 hours and I would be masterfully productive and creative. And other days, 12, 13, 14 hours, you know, and you've got a bunch of stuff done, but in terms of how fulfilling it may have been, it maybe was just running around doing a lot of things, you know, which sometimes we have to do. But this idea of shifting that sense of productivity and commitment internally, And that those, we're going to keep talking about that because I know it's hard. So as I say, everything I say to all of you, I say to myself on a regular basis. Thank you, Winnie.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other experiences? Specific plans? What brings you a little joy these days?
Yeah, actually, it's funny to know that our stories seem to be quite similar. Um, I'm just having the same experience as Winnie explained.
Uh-huh.
Um, but what I do to bring myself fun, I have a 5-year-old niece who, at these tough times, have no option to go to kindergarten. And since her parents both work from home and there is no one to care for her, I sometimes take her to myself.
Hmm.
And I try to play with her, and we draw and make some fun things of color papers.
Uh-huh.
And this way I try just to distract myself because I also work from home and I also need to somehow cut myself off my work and all other stuff. And taken that we are having every day these staff meetings and
Mm-hmm.
conferences, which are quite exhausting because I can't stand staying with the camera on all the time.
Hmm.
It's really a rewarding experience with my niece, and she has quite a good energy and brings positive vibes to me.
Hmm.
And but what is also on my list, I have recently bought a guitar
Mm.
to study. Yeah, I'm now looking for good online courses. If someone of you may know, please let me know because I'm a starter. I play the piano, but I'm quite new to this instrument, so I think it's also going to bring me some joy. And yeah.
Definitely connect with me offline because as I work with the Berklee School of Music, maybe one of our faculty members would be interested. Maybe they give private lessons so I can inquire.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you.
no, absolutely. I hear you, Annie. You know, it's the nice thing. We don't have children, but we have these puppies, and they're real puppies,
Mm-hmm.
and they're about 1 year old. But the great thing about kids and pups and plants and these kinds of activities is that they take us out of our minds. I don't know about you, as you say, you
Yes.
know, but we love the work that we do, but something about adulthood means that, you know, we still all get really integrated in what we do, really focused. Even if it's something you love, you can get stressed. There's complications, you know, there's responsibilities. And so this idea of when you engage with children, when you engage with pups, it goes back to that sense of play, right? That sense of nobody expects anything from you. You can't do it wrong, right? As long as you're there. And kids are fun in that sense. And we see that with our dogs too. You know, it's so simple. No matter what's happened in the day, our pups, Amadeo and Beta, you know, they love you. They give you kisses. They love to play their games. And um, it just pulls us out of I think, our serious adultness into really more of a kind of human, healthy disconnect. And it's critical. I think I don't know what I would do, much as I love what I do, but what I would do at the end of the day if I didn't have that. So it's wonderful that you have that opportunity because, you know, a lot of kids are loving this. They get to see their folks more than they ever had, you know? And there's a beautiful video by Nigel Marsh on TED, if I remember his name correctly, about work-life balance. And he tells the story about one of the days that he picked up one of his kids. I think it was from the doctors or something like that. I may be misremembering the story, but it stuck with me because he says, you know, all he did was pick up his kid, and he has a couple children. And he took his kid for pizza, and he said, Dad, this is the best day of my life, you know, and how much it hit him, saying, oh my gosh, it was that simple. Just to spend one-on-one time with one of my couple of children I have and share a meal and focus on each other. The best day of his life, you know? So I think that and we'll do a talk about relationships, but if we choose to dig deep, there may be a lot of healing in relationships, and a lot of nurturing and deepening that will happen here. It may get clumsy. It may require some fights and some arguments and some, straining. But if people allow it, I think it could really add enormous value to people's relationships. Thank you, Annie. Anyone
Thank you.
else? Any other thoughts? Questions?
Or you're just saying about kids. So I don't have kids. I have my dogs, but they're a little bit older than your dogs, so they're not quite so playful. But just in front of me, is a row of houses, and they have on their roof, they've got a terrace, which is like their garden. And so there's a family that lived just across from me, which is mother and two young girls. And it's, while I'm sitting at my desk working hours and hours and hours, it's my joy looking over and seeing the little kids having fun, and the way that the mother is enjoying that time with them so much.
That's beautiful, and as you say, somehow we're finding joy in each other. My mom mentioned to me the other day, she's alone at the moment just due to a travel interruption with all this, but at home and safe, thank God. And she's got these wonderful neighbors where she is who gave her a table, so that because they have to have the social distancing, but since they share a terrace, so while they're eating, she can sit on her side with the little table and share a meal with them. So it's amazing how much love is coming out with people, and all this, and consideration too. And that's one of the things that people have been saying is that, if you want to see the joy, there is a lot of it happening. And this situation will bring out a lot in people. It'll bring out some of the best and some of the worst. But I think every time I hear, we're not in the city, but every time I hear that, people are applauding for the healthcare workers and other workers, sanitation workers, at the end of the day, just the thought of that makes me joyful. So I'm really glad that you're finding that in your surroundings. Any other thoughts or questions, my dears? Well, in that case, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful upcoming holiday and weekend. Next week, what we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned briefly, we're going to go deep dive into how to get a bit more peace and acceptance with this evolving situation. Also, we're going to think about how to further our focus on the things that are the most important, and then really try and start to create some flow. And again, as we said, we're kind of gently pushing these ideas, understanding that this is all evolving and that our circumstances are evolving, but this idea of planting seeds in our gardens, so to speak. The recordings of this will be available on our YouTube. Feel free to share it. For anyone who you think this might help, or the invitation, our hope is only just to connect with as many people as possible and support everyone during this time. So I thank you again for joining us, and big hugs from us here.